Welcome to the February 25th OpenZFS production user call. We have Andrew, Stu, Philip, Rob, and myself, Michael, so far. And we've just been kind of chatting amongst ourselves. And if anything, thank you, Ruben. You kindly loaned access to a machine to Rob to test a new SHA 512 patch. And it seems to have worked, and it should be in the next release of OpenZFS. Rob, do you have anything to add to that?
No, just go go team. I love it.
That was less than a week to make that happen. Yes, please. We were griping about the definition of LTS and long-term support and came up with not very good ideas of just LTS, least terrible solution, or lies told by suppliers, or least tasteful surprise. But poor Stu was burned by Ubuntu changing something at the kernel level in the Linux kernel, jumping from a whopping -94 build to the -100 build. It seems lseek changed where it shows up in proc. I'll make a note of that. And so, Stu, just from a process perspective, what could have you done, should have you done to catch that in advance and not kind of ruin your day?
I'm sure
Anything?
it's probably in a review document somewhere, but I found it on a third-party supplier that was getting reported on bugs for something very similar.
Ah,
So I guess ask AI.
was there a change list you could have, should have followed, or it wouldn't
I I
necessarily have been
have yet to
obvious?
I have yet to find one, but I was too busy scrambling to try and solve the problem than figure out what the cause was. So um, that's on my list to see if it's in somewhere buried in a change.
Okay, so I put a comment there, similar situation where, and yeah, asking the right question probably got you there, but gee, you probably spent more time on that than you had hoped. That said, Rob, I assume you played some role having announced it in the 2.41 and 2.36 releases. Any highlights to share with those?
I actually don't think so. They're just nice, a very nice, calm, pleasant ambient light that you might enjoy, a quiet drink with or something, or at a friendly dinner party where you don't have to think about computers. I am You were not even implying an analogy, I think, and yet I have already taken it too far. No,
Well, pairs nicely with.
yeah, yeah. Yeah, quiet walks on the beach. No, as particularly a point one release and particularly early in the year, it tends to be a lot of just small bug fixes and minor quality of life improvements. There's some small things around, how do we account space when uh correctly when it's not this, but it's kind of like when dedupe and a special device are available and special small blocks is split like this and these kind of niche cases where already if you already know that if you've already bumped into it, then you will like this, and if not, then you don't need to worry about it. But a lot of things like that. So yeah, the
Oh,
most interesting reason for, you know, people is probably Linux 6.19 is supported, which is the most recent stable series. But people already running on the edge will already have noticed that and grabbed that. So
cool.
it's it's just a good steady as she goes release. I like it.
Was 619 one of those? Oh my gosh, they broke the API and OpenZFS is dead on Linux, and then oh, you fixed it? Or is
Oh,
that a different lift?
that was 17 or
Oh,
18.
17. Oh, okay, cool.
I think it may have had something in it that was actually harder than that Sky
Hmm.
is Falling change, but I can't remember. But
Okay.
like whatever.
Yeah,
That's why we get the big bucks, right?
there you go.
Never mind.
To quote you, wait, we have pay grades? Anyway. You had a question for the group.
I do. And it is around the question is basically what even is the mount point property? And I'm coming at this from
The
Let him finish.
I'm coming at this from three different through three different directions based on recent work I've been doing, and I will describe those. So one is that I was speaking to a user at a conference a few weeks ago, came up to me and said, "Can you help me fix my ZFS?" I'm like, "Yeah, sure. We're at a conference. That's what the hallway track's for, right?" Um, and what it ended up being is he had a situation where when he rebooted, it would run, effectively ZFS mount -A from whatever the systemd unit is. And it would only bring up like half of the data sets, not all of them. And he had and then, but because all the mount points are still there and it looks like the file system's there, services would start and then they would break because they don't have their database. And actually what it's done is it's mounted them in the wrong order. So it's mounted it's mounted mounts further up the tree over the top of ones further down the tree.
Yep.
And he'd worked out a workaround for this, which was to, like, he'd written a little script to basically unmount everything and then kind of mount two key data sets out of order. And what actually ended up happening, he had a trailing slash on one of his mount points, one of his mount point properties, and he had a double slash on in the middle of one somewhere else further down the tree. And the way that ZFS sorts them, it just does a like a what's the just like is it a lexicographic sort? Just a regular letters and numbers kind of sort. So it
I would
didn't know
expect
that.
alphabetical. I
Yeah,
would expect it to just be an alphabetical sort.
yeah, like the default. So it didn't know, it wasn't a path sort. So it didn't know that it had to like collapse slashes, and it didn't know that it had to remove trailing slashes and things like that. So that's one part of it. So I put a patch in. I've sent a PR up for that, and that's still waiting. But one of the questions around that was the way I implemented it was we don't actually change anything in the mount point property. We simply reinterpret it as well, like we read it off the pool and collapse them or whatever as we sort them. So we do it down at the sort part. That gets the mounts working properly. But there was a reasonable question: should we actually kind of always store the canonical form? And I think I don't know the answer to that, and that is because, or my initial sort of thought was, because what does mount point mean on Windows? Is mount point by definition a Unix-like path, or is it platform specific? And we don't, I mean, I have opinions or ideas about this, but we don't have an answer because it hasn't really come up. And I think it's important. This is not the whole. This is not the whole question.
No,
but
that's cool.
we'll get to where we are. But
Take care, Philip.
I think that's interesting anyway. So that's one unit of work. The next unit of work I've been doing around mounts is that ZFS deeply assumes that there is a one-to-one mapping between mount point and data set. And this is sort of reasonable. This is kind of a traditional Unix view of things. A file system will only be mounted at one point, and that's kind of it. So a single path in mount point kind of makes sense. Doesn't hold on Linux, at least, because Linux has a file system can be mounted at lots of different places. In fact, it's not even just Linux. Because once you start talking about like jails and the idea that a data set is mounted in a different environment, possibly with a different root. This is where the mount point doesn't always necessarily match up to where it actually is on the system, or It could have multiple mounts, so you have bind mounts where you can mount it in lots of different places. You can even mount the same file system at the same mount point multiple times, because Linux's mount system is a tree of mounts. Now, this is actually causing us real problems at the moment because part of the way that we do things on Linux is like if you change the property of a file system, if you change the read-only parameter, or you change property on the data set. So you change the A-time property, you change the read-only property. We have to essentially unmount everything and remount it. Sometimes, like it's complicated when we do that. It is a mess. I am cleaning it up. But that means we have to know about all the alternate mount points so we can apply that change in all those different places because different mounts can have different properties. So what we now have is the mount point property on the data set is insufficient to describe the way it might actually be connected up to the system at any given point, at any given point in time. Because you might ZFS mount it, and then you might do a bind mount, and then you might unmount the original. So the data set is still mounted, but it's not mounted where the mount point property says it is. Now, there's ways for us to figure this out, but it does sort of have the question after that of, well, should mount point have multiple mount points? What do you expect ZFS mount to do in that situation? I don't have a good answer for that either. And so I'm going to shut up.
Yes.
But what I'm going to say is I'm getting to the point where I'm starting to wonder. Oh, sorry. The other bit of it is mount point. What does mount point really mean when you transplant a pool from one place to another? Because not all systems, even of the same type, Linux, have the same path structure. But also you might be bringing your pool through into a jail or you want to mount it at a backup position or whatever. There has been talk in the past of having in the same way you can have the alt root pool import option, having a per data set prefix so that when you send your backups elsewhere, you want a backup /var and you send a stream of your /var to somewhere else, it doesn't then mount over /var on the remote system. And you could turn can mount off or whatever, but I feel like, so between all these things, I feel like we're getting to the point where it's not really clear to me what mount point is trying to describe. If mounts are so complicated and so system specific, maybe they should just be the system mount tools. There's all this complicated stuff. There's no issue expressing all of that with the standard Linux mount infrastructure. So, and given that mount point may not actually be meaningfully portable across different environments like Windows or whatever, should we then say we could say mount point is best effort, or we could say there is a per operating system mount point, and we don't, or per host or whatever, and we don't automatically apply mount point on anything other than its host, but you could set a different property. Or, or the extreme at the end is we remove all of the mount point controls and management from ZFS entirely and require that you do it through the host system. I'm not actually proposing that, but that is the high price point that draws you back into the. That's everything I've got.
On
I'm
that
shutting up now.
On that last note of taking away of taking it out of ZFS hands, ZFS already has the facility to take it out of its hands. You just set it to legacy. I mean, that's what legacy. If you set mount point to legacy, that's what that means.
Yes.
So, I mean, that's already a thing.
Sort of.
Well, but I think the bigger point is, why would you want ZFS to do it anyway?
I mean, convenience.
It's convenient, absolutely. But from if I'm importing a petabyte of stuff that has 400 spaces underneath of it, that order is something I want to define on how it's being brought in. So if it's, whether it's ZFS import saying, hey, there's a JSON file that has my mount order and the space mapping that I can control directly versus, hey, random alphabetic might be good enough. Those are the type of things that, why would you try and do something you shouldn't do?
But 90% of the time, you did specify that with how you set it up initially. And how you set it up initially is usually what you want to keep using.
Generally, yes. Outside of the asterisk for clustering.
Yeah. Oh,
it's a whole different conversation, which
clustering's a whole other conversation.
Right.
ZFS is not built for clustering. We have had this conversation to death.
Yes.
It's unfortunate, but it's the truth.
Well, until we get to that, I can't remember what the name of this. The original. We talked about it at the last conference.
Yeah, I mean, we spent a lot of time discussing it.
But until we get to that model where it's the VDEV is completely virtualized out, and you can say, hey, that VDEV is writable, this one's readable. Type of thing, which abstracts the pool away from things, and we get into more chaos. But from a baseline standpoint, convenience is convenience. But the control level stuff, if it's set up right, you don't have to think about it. And if you're stacking the mounts, which I do not frequently anymore, but I used to. Okay, I mount the base, then mount another one underneath of it and over top of it and sideways to pull things back in, and then write the whole thing out at the end. That's not a feature I expect ZFS to solve for me. But if it happens to be in that state when the system crashes or reboots, I want it to go back to the normal state, not my Stu's monkeying around state, if that makes sense.
So, yeah, I mean, that's probably, maybe that's okay. Like, maybe we can sort of go, a best effort would be like, yeah, you get one, but more than one, you're on your own. You get one mount point, but more than one, you're on your own. But that doesn't, there's still a lot of stuff that ZFS still has to understand about that, because there are still interactions. Like, if you have a mount point property, or you don't, if you have a mount point legacy, but maybe if you have a mount point property and then you add 2 bind mounts, realizing that you may not know that you've done that because, Docker will use bind mounts heavily to build its environment. What does it mean when you say ZFS unmount? What does it mean when you say ZFS set a time equals on or off on a data set that has multiple mount points? Because that is a per mount property, not a per superblock property on Linux. So we could just, so at the very least, we'd need to detect that it's multiply mounted. But does that mean we refuse to set those kind of properties? I'm not really asking for an answer. It's just that there are knock-on effects that mean we can't just throw up our hands because we live in a society. We live inside the computer, which is doing other things. And I suppose like one of the places this actually came up, which was where it was also slightly damaging is, and I mean, this is kind of an implementation detail, but kind of not. If you do ZFS receive -F, this is a mounted file system or an in-use data set. Roll it back to its last snapshot, and then the receive goes over the top of it. So you blow away what's already in use because you've done a rollback to the previous snapshot, like under the hood. However, if that doesn't have a previous snapshot, then you are rolling it back to 0, to like you are recreating it. And because we don't have a 0 snapshot internally, we can't actually roll that data set back. So we receive the stream into a new data set, and then the user space tools will unmount and unmount the existing file system and then mount the newly received one, which now has a new name, in its place. Now, if you have a bind mount for this, you have not completed the mounts, the unmounts. So you haven't fully released the existing one. So the new one doesn't swap in properly. And now you get both mount points still exist, but when you try and access them, you get an IO error. End of story. And the actual workaround there, fortunately, is to manually unmount them all and then remount them. Now, in some ways, this is an implementation detail, but and like I'm working on this. I'm actually going to fix this in particular, and it's a pretty niche case, but it sort of just speaks to the ZFS has deeply baked in at this idea of one mount to one data set, and that's it. And knowing how far to build the support out for different shapes of that is complicated.
Well,
Yeah.
Sorry, go.
I just logged into one of my zones on a Lumos box, and it's a zone. So it directly sees the file system, at least the parts of it that it has access to. And basically from root on down in it, everything has a mount point of legacy. So on our side of the fence, for that kind of context at least, we're actually using legacy mount points for, and we're letting the guest OS's basic level stuff handle things. I don't know if that helps you at all, but that's the immediate observation I have. I can't look at the parent OS right now because I'm not. I actually can't SSH into the parent OS from here, even with my VPN attached. So that's all I got.
No, I mean it's interesting. I guess I could go and test it a bit. Like I'd have some questions about like, well, no, not really. Like what happens if you change some of the mount point properties or whatever. But I guess if it's still only mounted in one place, then it's obvious what to do regardless. It's when it's mounted in more than one place, it's
I mean,
weird.
back to the receive -F thing, Rob. The protection should be on the receive side saying, hey, this is coming in as /var blah. /var blah is already mounted. Are you really, really sure?
Yeah, that's what the force switch is for.
Okay.
I mean that's kind of an easy one conceptually to fix because it's actually different behavior depending on whether or not you've got a snapshot on the receiving side.
Got it.
But
Okay.
but that is not actually a variable in the choice of what to do. So like in that case, it should just be, well, no, I may be going down a different code path, but I will still make the same thing happen. But it is a thing that only comes up because it breaks an assumption inside ZFS. It doesn't ever bother to check, is this still mounted? Because of course it's not. I already did an unmount.
Yeah, it's belt and suspenders type.
Yeah.
Yeah, you said you're unmounted, but there's still stuff there. So,
Yeah.
or it could catch that double stacked mount as well. I just unmounted the first one, not the second one.
Yeah.
And then you're,
Yeah. It can be multi-mounted. I've got this cool test case at the moment which mounts the same data set onto the same mount point like 10 times and just shows it in a nice little tree. But I mean, even in that, you can get weird things where it's like file systems that are nothing to do with ZFS, like, mount the same data set 5 times, then mount something over the top of that, and then mount that original file system 5 more times over it. It's like, well, if you say ZFS unmount, is it its responsibility to unwind that entire tree? I can argue yes or no, depending on which kind of asshole I'm in the mood to be right now. So it's like, it's very difficult. I don't really know if there's a good.
I mean, and it kind of goes back to that.
I can tell you what my answer is to that question.
Yes, Andrew. Then Stu.
My answer is no. You fail to unmount with an E-busy.
You fail which unmount? The entire stack?
All of them.
Right. So I have to.
All of them. E-busy everything. Something else.
I mean, I tend to agree. It does make the code a little harder because I actually have to develop a plan before I start, which is okay, and notice that it's in there. But also, you could make the argument the other way, which is to say if the mount point property says legacy, maybe you should just say, well, no, you can't use ZFS unmount for this at all, and maybe it already does that. But if ZFS thinks it owns that mount point because it has a mount point property of that, maybe you could argue that it does get to do that. It does get to unmount everything because I own the mount point. I'm not making that argument, but I don't think it's an unreasonable argument.
The counter argument to that is that if I remember correctly, the current setup, at least on our side of things, is that if you have something with an open file system or with an open file handle and you try to unmount, usually under normal circumstances, if you don't try to force it, it will refuse the unmount. Sorry. I believe. That's not something I try doing a lot, but
yeah,
I'm pretty sure I've gotten E-busy on unmounts before. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, no, that's exactly right. So I think that this edge case is generated by people that should know better versus people you're actually trying to code for.
Yeah, see,
it's like, you know what? That mount won't release. I'm aborting. And I think that is perfectly legitimate as a ZFS control endpoint.
Yeah, I think it's reasonable for that case. I realize I'm on that particular one. Like if it was just that would be what I do. But I guess for me, it's all pointing back to what does it mean for ZFS to manage the mount point, I suppose. Is it just you get one automatic mount and after that it's just the same as legacy conceptually? Or is it, so you get one automatic mount as a convenience and after that I'm out unless there's only one mount? Or is it something more expensive?
Or change the can mount property to can mount as ZFS. As ZFS controlled versus can mount true or false.
Yeah, I mean, does that mean we refuse other mounts that weren't initiated by ZFS?
No, that you're not going to either mount over or
you're just not going to touch it. Like on Linux, you're not going to bind mount that somewhere else. Yeah, you're not. Well, I can't really control you not mounting over the top. but if I see another mount, I'm not going to get in there. I'm going to refuse like a move mount or a pivot, anything that changes its mount point.
Yeah. All good questions. I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know either. I kind of knew that would be the answer, such that it was an answer, but I thought I might have. I mean, I'm already from this conversation already finding that there is a there is a there is a set understanding of what mount point means, like at its heart. Um, it's how far that extends that maybe we're not all sure about, which is okay. I think I can work with that as a starting point. I still am interested in what it means on other machines. Like if you wrote E colon as mount point for your Windows data set, your ZFS on Windows data set, is that allowed?
Honestly, I ran ZFS on Windows, so I'm not sure, but I would think so.
I mean, maybe even on macOS, because like macOS, you're not allowed to, the system won't let you mount things at the root. Extra things have to be under /volumes. So, I mean, you can maybe say the pool belongs under there, but I don't know. But I guess if we're saying that, do we then have to have a mount? See if we say, E colon foo is okay for your Windows on ZFS, ZFS on Windows mount point property, then do we expect that property to be portable?
I mean, I
Or
know
is it?
that.
Hmm,
Sorry,
okay, I got nothing.
I was going to say I know that. Um, even back to the Sun days, ZFS mount code can and would fail under certain conditions. Notably, the condition that would always come up would be if there was any files at all where you were trying to mount. Um,
Oh,
so
interesting.
that leads me to the conclusion that the the idea is that the ZFS mounting systems really for the basic situation of you have one mount point. Because that's, from most of us, that's 95% of the time. So it's usually a good default, but once you start getting beyond that default, it's maybe not a good solution anymore.
Yeah. I mean, a lot of it I can just see. Yeah, this is all coming out of, yes, your systems like your Proxmox and your TrueNAS and that sort of thing, which are like, like container deployment engines. So, like, oh, I download all these different Docker deployed apps from the internet and I just throw them all down there. And all of those are like, yeah, bind mount, bind mount, bind mount, off we go. Da, 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 da. And then you jump in and do a ZFS unmount and what should happen there, and weird things happen. And I could, so like, this is a situation where the administrator, if there is, an administrator, doesn't necessarily know that they've done all these things, or that these things have happened on their watch, perhaps is a better way to put it. But that doesn't mean we could still recognize that and behave sensibly. And that's probably the way forward. Probably it's like, I am in a world that I cannot resolve, which is things like, uh, can I unmount all these things? Well, there's still things using them that I have no insight into. So maybe I'll just stop right now and, a better error message and sort of go from there and maybe wait to see what people complain about, or I don't know. I mean, it's got to be better than them complaining that it just didn't work, or now I'm getting IO errors. So
now you got me curious about what Proxmox does. So I'm going to log into one of my Proxmox machines and see.
maybe there. To be honest, I said Proxmox because I know that there is often ZFS and container deployments on there, but I have never used it. This did come from a TrueNAS user originally, so I know it's at least a small amount of problem there. Well, no, I know it is because we're like we've got some PRs upstream. Like we've got a PR upstream right now that we're working through, which is about understanding how to apply mount options to mount points where the mount point property is set to legacy.
Proxmox is interesting, actually. Proxmox and I have my complaints with how Proxmox stores damn near everything in ZFS, as I find it to be a mess. But for their disk images, they don't set mount point at all. It doesn't look like, oh, well, wait a minute. These are, no, that makes sense because these are all related to Beehive, I think. I don't know if I don't have anything on here that's actually a container. So I'm not completely sure on that, but at least for some of their stuff, they don't seem to set a mount point at all, which would make sense for Z-vols, because these would all be Z-vols. Yeah. I would need an actual container on here to know for sure about that.
Interesting. Yeah,
So I'd
But
love
it seems to set the mount
more.
point about how I think it would, based on how they structure their stuff.
Yeah.
So throwing a few things out there. Number one, documenting the perceived default behavior is probably smart. And I grabbed some snippets from the manual pages on a FreeBSD host with OpenZFS, and yeah, mount point's a mount point. And a few things about inheritance. I'd be curious if it's more accurately a default mount point, or like you said, can mount by ZFS, because it can mean so much more, to quote Rowan Atkinson.
Yeah.
Love Actually. So that said, I actually got thoroughly burned this week on mucking around with FreeBSD VM images that I would import under a host and slam packages in and slam stuff in. And I noticed that the source package would pretend to write. I could list the output. The written property would increase by 0. I could snapshot it, which resulted in nothing. I'd unmount it and remount it or boot it. And then suddenly there's absolutely nothing in that typically, well, gigs, 200 megs or whatever, how much sources directory. And so my workaround was, one, to destroy and create the data set before doing anything to it, which I thought might be a make fs-tzfs bug. But at the same time, based on what you just said, the fact that the recreation or force receive would unmount, recreate with potentially different GUIDs and other stuff, it's a whole different matter, which might impact like Daniel Bell and his replication and all that. Because when you first said the whole force thing, it may change stuff you don't think it's going to change. So that's a whole different conversation. But I then realized that the clever, careful over-mounting of, say, the root data set, capital ROOT, which does have some directories for other mount points, of course, has to be in the right order. And of course, some of them are nested like user var and user source. And oh, yeah, this is very much a challenge. And I've seen it in the wild just this last few days. So, I guess to that question I had, what is the accurate definition? Is it a default mount point? Is it a ZFS controlled mount point? Because so much can take place outside of its control, for lack of a better term, given that the host OS can do all kinds of crazy things.
A file system can also have a mount point set in the mount point property. Directory is created as needed, and ZFS automatically mounts the file system when the ZFS mount-a command is invoked. Without editing the VFS tab, the mount point property can be inherited. So if pool/home has a mount point of /export/stuff, then pool home user automatically inherits mount pointed /export/stuff/user. A file system mount point property of none prevents a file system from being mounted. If needed, mount system can also be managed with traditional tools if the file system mount point is set to legacy.
I trust that's the illumos manual
That
page,
is
which
the
might actually be
illumos man page
a
for
better source of
ZFS.
truth as we've lost track of
I-
where we should be. That's actually
Is
good.
it an absolute source of truth? No, because we're on different forks,
Yeah.
but it's at least a historical source of truth. I think it's reasonable to say.
Is that off the web or off the console?
That's my console. I'm
Okay.
connected to one of the machines,
I'll just
so it was
grab one
easier.
off the web and link it. Because yeah, that's true. It's like, well, what did they originally intend will help determine what we might later want to attend. Because I don't think there was Docker on Sun OS 7 or whatever the heck it was back then. So
There
anyway,
was not.
exactly.
We still don't have a good Docker implementation, which
Excuse me.
I would love to see
Couldn't-
change. Because I think running Docker as an API for Solaris zones would actually be pretty nice.
I thought Cantrell and friends made a big stink about that with SmartOS back in the day, but what do I know?
They probably did.
And let me guess, the Illumos page has not been broken up like they did at one Dev Summit years ago at the Delphix office.
No, it is a single.
So it's like 3 miles long or kilometers or
Yeah,
something.
it is a single man entry. So yes,
Okay, I'll try to.
Michael,
find
I
a
just-
limit.
Michael, I
we're
just
being
linked,
historical here.
just linked to that
Oh,
part
thank you. Good.
in the
Your-
chat, that specific section. And
perfect.
that is
Your
interesting reading, and I need to
browser's faster
study
than
that.
mine.
because that already has some suggestions. I need to write all this down properly and write a
Snarf it
some
from the
kind
docs
of-
here, step one. I mean, that's why I'm taking
Yeah.
notes. It's no secret.
yeah, exactly. And right,
Oh.
yeah, and maybe I'll put together some kind of I don't know, some kind of proposal or at least a guiding document for myself that I will say I have justified my decisions this way, and hopefully people just go, well, that's very sensible, Rob.
Well, step one, is there actually a problem to fix, or is it simply, well, if you want to get complex and creative, that's purely an OS level issue, not a ZFS issue. It's like,
I mean, I would
Yeah.
go
say
wild. I mean,
more
knock
than
yourself
is-
out. We're not, just make, don't prevent people from going wild, but enable whatever the heck they want to do, and they can burn their own fingers and toes. Go ahead, Andrew.
I would say rather than is there a problem to fix, is the problem too niche to justify the effort?
Yes,
Which of the many problems described?
all of those.
Yes.
All of them, exactly. It's like, yes.
The defaults have worked for 95+% of the world. The 5% are either way too stupid to understand it anyway, or are trying to do something stupid.
Yeah,
That's
I
where you-
don't, I
Maybe not.
I
Not
don't,
stupid,
yeah,
but yeah,
I don't agree with that just because it's not just because I'm getting reports, but it's because that old model of one mount point to one data set is not like it goes against the rub of what Linux is doing, but it also doesn't necessarily hold on non-Unix like platforms and even some Unix like platforms. And I would like ZFS to be able to connect there without some horrible nightmares.
No, and that makes sense, Rob. It really does. It's
Yeah.
But-
I mean, that's
but-
okay. I do appreciate the point, I should say.
but 92% of zettabytes under storage are quasi legacy. Or
Yeah.
single mount points.
And
So-
maybe the answer then is just we enforce legacy a lot harder or enforce non-legacy a lot harder or one of those things.
I mean, I think
So invite people to make the right choice rather than making ZFS guess. Because then it could be, well, TrueNAS just ships everything with legacy and we do it up in the middleware layer or something, which
I
might be a
think-
better way to put it together.
for the question on Mac OS, if you're missing that required prefix on Mac OS that no other system requires, okay, make the the specific paths for Mac OS, tack it onto the front. Fine. If we're talking about Windows and Windows wants to put a drive letter in there, that's fine, but understand that it just probably won't import on other systems when you first get it. I mean, I think both of those are probably reasonable things to say.
I
And
mean,
as far as Windows goes, Windows does have the concept of mounts within mounts. I mean, most Windows people don't use it very
yeah,
much.
union mounts, so cool.
Not even union mounts. I mean, you can actually just mount a file system just within a directory type mount point, just like you would on a Unix. That has no problem with it.
Mm. Yeah, the whole C business is
Really a
having
legacy,
the
but it's a
Win32
legacy Windows will have for eternity. So,
Yeah.
I mean, I feel like that's not an unreasonable.
Yeah,
thing
I
there.
mean, I'm projecting a long way into a future that may never happen, but I'm sort of just thinking like if I had only ever known Windows and I saw this Windows ZFS and I thought I'm going to use that, and then it was like, well, the Windows ways of working things are a little bit weird because this thing came from Unix, so you'll need to learn these slightly different concepts and just understand these other things. I'm just going, yeah, was this made for me? Um, but if we have an answer to that internally, and our different versions have just been implemented to around that, then the Windows user doesn't need to feel bad from, or like maybe they're going to do some damage from the word go, which isn't necessarily a reason to do or do anything now. Like we're not in a hurry, but I like to at least, if I'm going to make it, and if I wasn't already fixing shit, I wouldn't care so much. But I'm like, well, if I'm going to change something, I want to at least change it in a
Having
way that we then it will help in the next for the next 25 years, you know.
having used Windows since before it was actually a true operating system on its own, I can tell you that my expectation of what the mount point command would work like is that you would be able to enter in the drive letter you want it to be, and it would at least attempt to put it there.
I mean, that alone answers one of my questions, which is, should I normalize the mount point property? And I opted for no, but I'm not sure. And now I'm still going to say no because, and just say that is a function of mount, the mount control code to take that property and turn it into something that makes sense locally, including flattening slashes. And the Windows version of that path fixing flattening function can do something else.
Well, the Windows version of it has to do something else anyway because your slashes
Exactly.
should go the other way. Mac
Yeah.
OS as well, because you don't use slashes at all, you use colons.
Yeah.
Kind of really used to, but yeah, yeah, and
Yeah.
it's more Unixy than ever.
Yeah.
Yeah, their Mac is getting weird
Hmm.
and inconsistent because they don't know what they are and haven't for God knows how long.
So while we're getting philosophical, ZFS has always created an implicit data set when you create a pool, and it creates mount points when you ask to mount. One might argue that that hand-holding automatic behavior is actually counterproductive because you should understand what's going on. And of course, we all find data directories filled with a bunch of mount points in like /mount/ a bunch of stuff like user, whatever. It's like, well, wait, how and when did those get there? I don't know, but such is life. And that came up recently in another thing where there's auto magic behavior and it's confusing. But another quick one about the none property. When it says prevents it from being mounted, does it prevent the host OS from mounting anything there? And it's literally Terra hostile, or oh no, it just means ZFS won't mount it.
That's a great question. I have one
That's a
of
good
those.
question,
Let me
and I
find
do
out.
not know the answer offhand.
We're about to find out.
Yeah, simple
Oh,
stuff
you're gonna
like
try
that,
it?
where heaven forbid someone sits
Yeah.
down and reads a manual page and tries to act on it. It's like,
Yeah, because I have a containing data set for something that is mount point none.
mhm,
If I
right.
say mount, so I'm not
Suspense
going
is
to be able to do
killing
it with
me.
ZFS mount. If I make it the ZFS mount, sorry, sudo mount -t ZFS Lucy root /mount. Yes, you'll ask me for my password. That's fine.
Mhm.
File system Lucy root cannot be mounted using mount. Use ZFS set mount point equals legacy or ZFS mount Lucy root. See ZFS 8 for more details. That is because mount-t ZFS actually maps to a program we supply, which is mount.zfs, which I believe is a shell script, which would probably understand what I'm doing, right? No, it's a binary. Okay, I'm going to have to read more about it. At
That's
least
in
on Linux,
TrueNAS or Linux or what?
that's Linux. That's the stock mount command. So
Oh,
I'll
okay.
do some checking as well. I'm just
Sure,
not
yeah.
in a good
Simple
place
stuff
to
like,
do
yeah,
it
exactly. But
necessarily right now.
yeah, the default mount command on Linux will call out to programs called mount dot file system name. So mount.zfs, mount.ext4, mount dot whatever. If you don't provide a -t, I can't remember if it's got some active detection or if it just tries them all until one turns up.
It does detect. It does detect on the super plot.
Right. That's right. The kernel can call out for a user mode helper, can't it? Yeah. Blah.
Yeah.
But yes. So, and then, but that's a program we supply. I've never read the code. But I can totally imagine it is just doing a lookup to start before it does a mount call. So in that case, it's the same code as ZFS mount would use. Well, that's
I will
cool.
say we have a documentation question here above all, because we're sitting here scratching collectively our heads saying, well, we don't know what that behavior is out of the box or what it was in Solaris long ago and what they intended. So let's think
Well,
about that before you make any sweeping changes that may impact that. Well, none no longer means none, which will help others
for
and burn
real.
others. And like, yeah, no, like your point about making, a decade or two of good decisions rather than surprise, change the behavior.
yeah, this evening I will go to my machine and at least see how illumos treats none with respect to that. So
Well,
I
That'd be
will
fascinating.
write that down and report back.
awesome.
Awesome. Thank you.
How is none treated on supported OS?
Oh, I suppose I have a FreeBSD box here right now, don't I?
So we've struggled with the definition of none. We've struggled with the definition of long-term support. We've struggled with what other, and mount point itself. It's like, we take these for granted, yet I know nothing.
That one.
Does the ZFS test suite do anything unique to overmounts at all?
I
And there are many
don't
types of mounts.
don't know. It has some low-key stuff for bind mounts, but it's not trying very hard. Basically, everything right now, the whole test suite is passing. But there are bugs I'm trying to fix, which means they are not being tickled by the test suite. I think I have a test on that other thing. So where are we? Mount compare.
Oh, and before I forget, is there any universal way to show the actual overmounts and what the stack looks like if you had those dozen or so you described? Like, who wins? Who's on top? Who's
you can, it's a little hard to read, but you can cat proc/self/mount info.
self?
I get the impression.
on Linux, something like that.
Yeah.
So there's
It's
the answer. What about the question? The question is how to
I
see.
I wrote a little program last week to demonstrate this, which I will,
Oh, good man.
because I needed to learn about this
Is this the correct path,
format.
Rob? On the screen, process/self/mount info or
Yeah,
underscore or something?
this is
Okay,
a very common way for
got it.
Linux to do this, because every process could be running in a different namespace. It's like, this is your view of the world. So I'm gonna put this one on GitHub for you to look at.
So self is yourself as a process.
This process, yeah.
We've humanized
Um,
it, anthropomorphized or whatever. Self.
Yes, anthropomorphized, the correct word.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. So I'm sitting on a Mac OS system as I host this call. Is there any simple test about prefixes or whatever it was you mentioned? Or
Are
I'll
you
just
running
spin up the
ZFS on
old.
it?
Yeah, absolutely, for a decade. But
Create a
code.
create a new file system and on it and set the mount point to slash something or another. Also, see what the mount point value starts out as on the other ones.
Yeah. Okay.
Both of those seem like interesting tests to me. And of course, Rob can tell me if I'm totally wrong on this.
I mean,
The mount points don't have trailing slashes for what it's worth by default. And I love and hate that it shows, say, mount points for snapshots, which kind of sort of, I guess, I get it, but. Okay, well, we've opened a lovely can of worms. Rob, you asked the initial two questions. Does this help at all? A little bit? Anything?
Yes.
Good.
Because one of those things, like, I sometimes I wonder if there might just be a lot of loud shouts to say, no, that is very clearly understood, you moron. And I'm like, that is an answer that I wanted. I've just thrown some links in the chat if people want to look at what
Please,
a
yes.
mount info file looks like,
Yes,
and what a
please.
parsed version looks like, and a parser for doing such things. You are free to take that program.
Michael, you said on your version, it actually shows a mount point for the snapshot.
Yeah, I can drop a sample in there.
On
it shows dash
my
for
side,
the mount point. It's like
okay,
dash,
yeah, it's a dash.
but, okay,
Dash
it's a
means
dash,
there's
but
nothing there.
it means there's nothing there, but so I suppose, can you set a mount point on a snapshot and it will automatically do the thing, or do you want to mount it manually
No.
from the OS? Because I've never done
No,
that. I've never thought to.
You cannot. No, you can't.
Yeah, I don't think you can.
You can't mount a snapshot directly. You can mount it through the magic.zfs directory.
Well, yeah, that's a different beast.
And because of that, and that's what the dash means. Dash in any property means this property is not valid for this dataset type.
Hold that thought before I type this down. Hold on one sec. Which means. So that said, is it going philosophical? I just listed mount points. Just ZFS get mount point, which is amazing. I hope you realize you can just type without the specific one. It gives you all of them, but then it's showing ones that where it's invalid. Should it simply not list them, or should it list them? I find it a bit annoying that it lists things that are not actionable.
I do too. I write
because it could be
TFS
hundreds
on that all the time.
Where it becomes almost necessary is when you're doing a type all, because it will be valid for some things and not for others. So for instance, if you're doing a type all, you have file system in there for which mount point is valid, and then your snapshots, it's not.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a good.
You see where I'm
It's a
headed
bit
with
of
that. It's like,
it's a bit of a philosophical question that it's like, should the properties you're asking for change the selection criteria for the data sets to list? So should the behavior of the tool be slightly variable depending on the query, or should it just be uniform and you get the same thing every time and you are forced to filter it down? Uh,
you
and
don't get
the
upset.
answer is yes or no, the same.
So yeah, and because keep in mind, if it's say a storage system with only 3 data sets or less that matter and 4,000 snapshots, it's like, oh, let me just go check.
Yeah.
Oh, good Lord. It's like flying at you.
Yeah.
That's not what I meant.
Honestly, I tend to use, unless I'm searching for a single property, I tend to use ZFS list more than I use ZFS get, just because the
Of
column
course.
output is much nicer.
No
Yes,
question.
I'm always using list. List is what I'm referring to here.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
Are
And if you
there,
need, yeah,
is there a great
you-
document on list versus get? Because that was one where a new user is like, well, wait, this one kind of sort of does it. That one kind of,
in my world, it's all the same man page.
hmm,
You
Yeah.
guys split the man pages up. So,
hmm.
but
Under the hood, they're the same command. So there you go.
Really? Oh, goodness. Okay.
But,
Yeah,
So what's the
they drop
distinction?
down to a uh a a generic get all the data sets matching this query and get these properties from them.
Hmm.
And then they have a different output formatter, which is
which
what
makes
made
sense.
it not too complicated to put in the JSON output formatter,
That's cool.
because
Oh, that's a plus.
it wasn't clean, but we already had some notion that we may want to present the output in different ways.
Hmm.
But yeah, I'm completely with him there that I will almost always use ZFS list space dash O followed by the columns I want. Usually
Yeah.
name, comma, something.
Oh God, name
So
name should be bold or something. The number of times I type CFS list dash O mount point and then go, oh, name comma
It
mount
is
point.
it is the default. You're overriding it.
Yeah, I know that,
well,
but
and
my fingers don't know that, or my something. My brain's an idiot.
note that grep is your friend because often you just take all the garbage and filter out quickly because that might be easier than
Right.
remembering all the dash O's and T's and
I
typing more. So yeah.
you're setting off my my annoyances.
Hmm. Well, trade
People
one
using
muscle
people
memory for
using
another.
people using grep when it's totally unnecessary.
Well, yeah, but if it gives
I
you a
love
shorter
people.
command to run, it's your friend.
The
Huh.
A lot
crunch
of
is
times
the crunch
it
is a
doesn't.
crunch.
People listing the entire file system and then grepping it, and it's like, no, you don't need to do that.
I remember back at university when I was doing an introduction to Unix course, because I barely used it, and I didn't know about the concepts of like standard in or standard out, and and also that like the shell was anything, but also that like grep could take a file name and it would do its own thing. So I was typing, cat foo pipe grep bar, and
Everybody starts doing that.
well, you see, yeah, someone looked at the tutor looked over my shoulder and goes, actually, you can make that quicker. You can go grep pattern file. And I'm like, oh, okay. And she's like, yeah, and it's better for the computer because it's only one process, and so that sort of thing. And it's fine, like whatever. But for some reason, it's wedged in my brain in just a way because now I think about it. Yeah, and cat will run on one core and grep will run on the other, and I'm going to get better results. I know it doesn't work that way, but I still am amused by my
There,
stupid thought.
a friend of mine wrote a thing out on is either Substack or LinkedIn this week on how AI is killing the concept of apprenticeship. And what Rob just described is what apprenticeship is.
Yeah.
Hey,
Yeah.
there's a better way to do that. Or hey, because what I do with the newbies on my team is like, okay, there are 4 different ways to get this information. Figure out the best.
Yeah.
So it gets them to think about that type of thing. But it's what Rob just described is just as fresh in my mind from my buddy's blog article.
Yeah.
Whatever it was.
Yeah.
I mean, you mentioned that. Here's the thing about that. The anti-pattern of padding to grep is so prevalent that I expect just about every AI, to hand it to people. Because I expect it's been trained on it.
Mm-hmm.
So the fact that you don't need to do that may die out.
I mean, I don't know. I mean, I prefer the pipeline myself because it's sort of just a kind of a spatial symmetry. You know, you start with this and then you that. And if you pipe and then you that and then you that and then you that. Whereas sometimes it's not and sometimes it is, and I find that it's a visual inconsistency that I find jarring, but I know that's very much about how I think about things. I mean, the incredibly visual thinker. If I can't make a picture in my head, I can't comprehend things. So
Too, huh?
yeah. So I don't suggest that there's a better or worse way. I think, you know, ultimately getting the job done in a timely fashion is more important than anything. But
Sure.
but yeah, I do find it interesting, different approaches.
But if you have to go through, if you have
sorry,
scanning for the context of ZFS, if you're scanning through 1,000 entries in a list, filtering down a list before you do a grep for what you need to helps a lot in getting a result faster.
Oh, absolutely. And that makes me think a lot about underlying constructions of things like, wouldn't it be good if you could write a pipeline kind of construction where the earlier stages are aware in some way of the filters that will be applied later and so can optimize those in certain ways? And I've realized there's entire research areas devoted to that kind of thing, but I think about a lot of things that I do nothing with.
That's a good sign.
Why you're all still alive right now.
So I will return to this briefly, that like the zpool command creates an implicit data set. It's like, well, that kind of is counterintuitive when you're learning the whole structure of it all. And then the ZFS mount command creates directories, which sounds kind of not its job, but it also does it so people, I'm sure someone developer on the project just got annoyed and said, how about we just automate this? And yeah.
I mean, there is an argument. I've
Said
heard
man
that
page. Sorry.
Yep.
I was going to say said man page strongly implies that.
And the
Yeah.
cat foo bar versus grep versus grep. So yeah, it's all true. I'm attempting to remember another one that had basically an automagic invisible step that was like, well, wait, this works and then doesn't work because, oh, it did something automagic and I didn't know that. And oh, well, my understanding was wrong. So verbose can be your friend.
I mean, I'll even be honest. on my illumos systems, I find looking at using the mount command on them to get the listing of mounted file systems because of because of the way ZFS deals with things is borderline useless. It's it's overwhelming, so I don't do it ever. I mean, I've typed the command and I've been like, okay, that's a lot of stuff.
There's some philosophy. Okay, while we recover from the philosophy, did we touch on this briefly last week while not recording, which was this BZFS, near real-time replication? And from memory, it was just like frequently checking for new snapshots and then just doing something if it sees them or something. Is it revolutionary, or is it just kind of a cool assistant to somebody doing something? Sorry, trying to get down to the description here. Has any
I've never used it.
heard of this?
I've heard of it. I've never used it. And the last time I looked at it was right before Zeta came out.
Mm-hmm.
So I never looked at
Zeta or
Or-
Zelta?
Zelta.
Oh,
Sorry.
yes, please. Yes. Okay, cool. Yes. And
Oh, I
Daniel and I at
apologize.
Zelta have had some philosophical discussions on, well, what's it look like? And oh my gosh, the written property is God's own property, and okay, well, there it's officially been discussed to some degree. Take a look, dear listener. FA Notify. I think someone brought that up as in like, hey, you can kind of do some of that with in-base tools. Maybe that was Jan jumping in. Rob, you pointed out of band that Matt Ahrens did some work in the illumos tree relating to native encryption. Is that just a backport / crossport from Open?
No,
or something else?
that's a brand new I mean it's a very tiny feature. So from what I remember, it is ZFS change key, which is how you
Right.
change the
Yeah.
key on a data set.
Yep.
It lets you set 3 different properties at the same time: key location, key format, and the key derivation property. So you can change the properties related to how the key is interpreted at the same time as you change the key, which makes sense. But the point is, change key can also set properties in the same transaction. And in illumos, Matt has extended that to, I'm not sure if it's change all properties or just change user properties, but the idea, I think at least the driver was for user properties. So when you change the key, you can also set a user property that says, this key is blah because of some other things. Okay, so it's user properties. And so it's a fairly small thing. But the idea of using user properties to track information, and since it already had property setting
interesting.
powers, why not? And I think probably that's a good thing to do in any command that can also change properties as part of its, or as a side effect, or as part of its operation, I suppose, should be able to change user properties. I think that would be a good thing to plumb all the way through everywhere, because user properties is how we connect management of our data sets to other systems. So to be able to say, yes, the key was changed on the 26th of February, whatever.
And from an auditing perspective, well, by whom and with whose approval, and so yeah. Today is not the day, but I can now point out that the table of hardware-assisted features is now somewhat out of date. That your patch was tested for SHA-512, so let's revisit that in a future meeting.
I will
that's
update
good
that.
stuff. Awesome. Well, keep it philosophical. It's a simple conversation like this, which has gone, well, now 2 hours, but if that saves countless users countless pain and suffering in the future, well, yay, you're doing Rod's work. Thank you, because yeah, developers usually just maybe ask the person in the next cubicle of how something should look, or if we're lucky on their little internal chat, but just to vocalize it from with a user's perspective and a developer's perspective, and yeah, is I'd hope a good thing.
It is for me.
Michael, I put the apprenticeship one in
No,
the
thank you.
chat.
Yes, perfect. Appreciated. Yes. Rule number 1, have your links handy, and you've done that. Good. Let's see. Is that worth visiting on the call? Let's open that up, Sucker. Why not? I mean, we're
If you want.
philosophical today.
I'm gonna have a read because on the surface of it, my instant response is death feels a bit harsh. It depends.
Well, like everything else, it's
Yeah,
it's a vision of things, and I know how
I
I
like.
learned.
Yes, I am right now, the last few weeks spending a lot of time uh with AI systems trying to figure out the extent to which they are interesting for my work and the extent to which I do not wish to give them control of things. And I have more questions than answers, and it surprises me that a lot of people speak very confidently about these things.
Well, AI
Well, no,
is confident.
Yeah.
it doesn't
I-
surprise me. I've told mine to tone down the confidence. I'm like, I will be very upset if you speak confidently. You are far better to say, what do you think? And it's like, yeah, I reckon maybe I can do that, if that's
I
okay.
hate them
Yeah.
in their entirety. I think humanity would be better if we just got rid of all of them. But hey, that's me. I'm told I may be a bit of a Luddite.
Yeah, I honestly don't know. I'm very uncomfortable with the whole idea, but I also am aware that my if my industry goes that way and I want to continue having opportunities, I at the very least need to understand them and understand how to apply them effectively and how to apply them not effectively, like any other tool. But that's just how I operate. So I got no beef with anyone who's like, yeah, nah, because I'm like, yeah,
As
there's
as
plenty of good
far as your
reasons for that
question,
too.
sorry,
Go, sorry.
as far as your question there, Michael, about should Mount create directories,
Mhm.
I can tell you the number of times on a Linux or other Unix system before ZFS that I would type mount and then utter a profanity because the mount point did not exist and have to go through and do it manually. Yes, it should. In fact, all other versions of mount should go and have that changed
Nice. I
And
like
does-
because it is a good
Right.
default
Right.
behavior.
Create on absence. Yes. I'm right there with you, Andrew.
And that said, are there situations where you could have an overmount when you didn't mean to because it collapsed the missing actual directory and
I mean, I
went
can
up a
tell you,
directory and plopped it on there? I mean, is that ever on some OS a problem? Because I can see how, yes, then you very much want that safety belt to like.
like I said earlier, from the point of view of at least traditionally on ZFS, it would refuse to overmount. It would just say, nope, there's something here.
Yeah,
I'm
okay.
throwing my arms up,
Mhm.
which again, I think is a fairly decent default action.
Yep. Yep.
And then if I want to override that, well, I can do that and I can make a sensible decision on how that's done.
Well,
Maybe, maybe not.
hopefully we've all blissfully missed an excellent blog post or tutorial or something out there on every aspect of mounting relating to ZFS and unmounting, of course, which is along for the ride. Or we add it to our collective append only to-do list. Anyway, we've covered some good ground. Rob, I hope that helps. And I'm glad
A
Ruben
lot.
came through on that hardware assistance of
Yeah,
your patch
so
test, because it's like, well, how do we write for future hardware? And I will gladly say, hey, thank you, Boyan, for adding NUMA support to Beehive simply to prototype a system that you can't afford. It's like, yeah, that's cool. That's cool. Anyway,
It's aspirational. One day I'd like to own a better computer.
aspirational, eh?
I'll act as though it's going to
Hey,
happen.
if I can't, just because I can't afford it doesn't mean I don't want to simulate it and pretend like I can afford it.
Exactly. Bling, bling.
Love it.
I maybe say we quit while we're ahead. Rob, dear guest, do you want the honors?
Everybody, please feel invited to like and subscribe.
Thank you, Rob.